Well, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Miranda, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here as we kick off International Production Design Week. We are some varied members of the International Advocates of the Production Design Collective, the IAPDC. And our panel today with these wonderful panelists is called The World Builder's Voice: How to put the production designer, how to give the production designer the stage. It's grounded in advocacy, but really inspired by the members of our group that have come up with amazing strategy and various different things to help the production designer be seen, respected, and to know their worth. So I think we're going to kick off with a land acknowledgement real quick. Fiona, do you want me to take it? You want me to read this out?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, please. Yep.
So we wish to acknowledge that we meet today virtually from across the world. We are all gathered on traditional lands and territories of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands through generations past and present. Please take a moment to honor the ancestral grounds you reside on and pay respect to those who are the original occupants of our vast and beautiful landscapes. Thank you. So I think, Fiona, should we start with a quick mission statement, and then we can do, we're going to kind of do the down and dirty, have everyone sort of self-introduce, like with a quick intro, very quick intro, because we don't have a lot of time and we want to get to the meat and bones of everything. But I'm just going to give a quick mission statement, and then we'll hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So the International Advocates of the Production Design Collective are a community of production designers from around the world advocating for the visibility, collective progress, and recognition of production design through sharing of information, transparency, collaboration, education, and a shared passion for excellence. Embracing inclusivity, tenacity, and seeing differences as opportunities for growth, the IAPDC empowers the future of production design. So having said that, I'm going to popcorn it over. I'm going to give it to Jamie. If you could just let us know your name, the country you live or work in the most, and the name of your most recent or favorite project. And if we could try and keep it short and pop it over. Cool.
Okay, Jamie Lapsley. I live in Edinburgh in Scotland. I guess the most recent thing has just come out in theaters in the States, a family film called Grow, which was very kind of new territory for me. But yeah, that was kind of been fun. So hi, I'll pass you over to Anu.
Hi, thanks, Jamie. I'm Anu Schwartz. I'm a production designer working in the New York metro area. And my most recent project is a television show called Your Friends and Neighbors. And good show, but not my favorite. My favorite might be I got to work with Jim Jarmusch as an art director on Only Lovers Left Alive, which was the highlight of my career. I'll pass it off to Amelia.
Hi, my name's Amelia Steely. I'm based in Los Angeles, and one of my favorite projects was something we shot in February, March of 2023. It's called We Strangers. It's a feature that just came out, and it's streaming now on a few different platforms. So I'm excited about that. I'll definitely talk about it today. I will pop it over to Blair.
Hi, I'm Blair Barnette. I'm based in London, England. The most recent thing I finished was a Ridley Scott docudrama about the Battle of Mogadishu, which we shot in North Africa, trying to make it be Somalia, which was a fun challenge. But I think the most fun thing that I really enjoyed was quite possibly the first job I ever had in the industry, which was working for Jim Henson. And I just became infused with the magic of everything that was fantasy and creative and ultimate making skills, and knew that that was my chosen choice in life. And it only got better from there. And passing it over to, who is that? Rose. No?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm Rose, Rose Legace from Canada, and well, I work in Toronto, and my most recent thing that I just finished was a pilot called Worried, based on a New York Times bestseller. So none of you have seen it, and you won't see it for a little bit, but and you may never see it. Who knows? It's a pilot. But the most fun project I did was probably a sketch comedy show called Tall Boys, a CBC comedy sketch comedy show that was just wildly outrageous, and 200 sets in like a wild amount of time. It was a crazy show, but actually the producers were great. I loved working with them, and honestly, sometimes that's the most fun, when just everybody is a good time, you know? So anyway, that's it.
Oh, pass it on.
Pass it on.
Trixie, maybe?
Yes.
Hi. Hi, everybody. My name's Trixie Collins, but everyone calls me Trix. I work in Auckland, New Zealand, and around the place, all around the place. My most recent project is a production called The Ridge, which was a little bit of a collaboration with Scotland, Jamie, so that was quite interesting.
I know Douglas very well. So.
What's that?
I know Douglas, the director, very well.
Yes,
so, yeah,
yes.
He's a character.
Isn't he? Actually, I had a fantastic time on it. And it was the first time I'd really done a thriller. So it was very exciting for me, because I often, worked on things like Power Rangers and various things, shows that are quite, building alternative worlds. So this was really quite a good, gritty thriller. And I think it's getting released on Tuesday. I know it's going to be on the BBC, and it's released here on Tuesday on Neon, which is the platform we have here in New Zealand. But I really enjoyed that. It's hard for me to say what my favourite job is, because every single production I go into, I usually just get so involved that I enjoy every single one. So I don't know. But I do like diversity, and I think The Ridge gave me that. It's like, wow, thriller, moody, mysterious, psychopaths, it was quite interesting. Yeah. So I'll pass on to Fiona.
Hello. Thank you so much. My name's Fiona Donovan. I work in Sydney, Australia. It's so hard. It's like saying, what's your favorite child? What's your favorite job? I had the most fun recently working in the most southern part of Western Australia on a thriller called Silver, which was a second series. What is it called? Anyway, that was a lot of fun. And I'm currently doing a very heightened reality kids show, which we are doing like enormous amounts of sets each week, and it's just too much fun. I think every day is a fun day in the art department. I'm going to pass over to Miranda.
Thanks, Fiona. Miranda Cristofani. I am currently in Los Angeles, California, and I would say I'm going to do my most recent project, because I agree it's really hard to pick a favorite project. I actually just did a commercial with Joshua Seftel, who's an Academy nominated documentary director. He's actually got a documentary out right now called All the Empty Rooms, which is a very poignant and sad documentary about gun violence and missing, children that aren't there anymore. However, I just did a commercial with him and Ted Danson, advertising something called Vitality Arts, which is an art program for the older community. So that was my last project. And I have to say, Ted Danson, complete gentleman, Josh Seftel, amazing to work with. Had a lot of fun, and it was fantastic. So that's me. I do both film and commercials. So should we get started with our actual questions or our panel and what we're here to discuss? Fiona, do you want to start with the first part, or should we?
Okay, so we're going to do an overview of what our responsibility, I think, what our daily responsibilities are as a production designer, and it's going to completely depend on where you are in the production as to what you're doing. But I think we have a lot of production designers here today, so we're probably saying, and what I've found is that coming together, we go, actually, that our jobs are so similar. We work so separately, but what we all do is very similar. So we're reading the script, we're reading the treatment, we're looking at the characters, and we're building the world and supporting the world. And it's not a job that you do by yourself. You collaborate with your director, the creative team, the producers, and then your own team. So you're both working, you're working with quite a few different teams the whole time. So a day could be turning up on set to make sure the sets are ready, that you're handing over to the shooting crew, and then you might be prepping for the next day or the next week, or you could be doing a treatment for another set that's happening. So every day is quite a different day. And then shall I hand over to you for the next part, Miranda? Yep.
Yeah, so just to add on that real quick, I mean, we're really in it from previs to visual effects, like the whole, 9 yards, locations. We have our hands and our fingers in everything, doing lookbooks, hiring crew. It's a collaboration, and we actually have another panel about the collaborative process that's happening later this week. But with that being said, and the amount that we do take on, we wanted to make this like an educational learning experience for everyone on this panel, not only the public out there, but the producers, as well as new and upcoming production designers, so that we can all learn from each other and advocate for each other. So with that being said, one of our first questions we want our panelists to elaborate on is, if you were to explain to another PD how valuable you are, and say, for example,
I'm going to say, could you explain 3 things that you do well? How do you add value to the production? And I'm going to start with Jamie and apologize because Miranda's got dodgy internet.
That's okay. 3 things that I do.
Yes, that add value to the production. And how,
geez,
yeah, 3
like
that you do well, and how do you add to the production? How do you add value to the production? Yeah.
So first thing would be ask really, really difficult questions, like kind of trying to sort of turn every stone over. And there's a few conversations I had last year about kind of my own passion for flipping things upside down and seeing what the alternate could be, and not taking anything for granted. So pushing my collaborators to keep going on the journey of discovery of the story, and not just settle in and say, okay, this is what we're doing, because we're never brought in early enough to kind of make the key strategic decisions we then have to force through the production once we're on. So I always think it's that thing of, is that one thing? Or is that 2 things? So it's always that thing of, you come in and you're in a position from your experience of putting sets and locations and crews together, is that you see a bunch of decisions that have been pre-made, and quite often you have to work out how you can dial that back to a position where the production will be in a better footing, not in terms of you as a designer, but the production on a better footing, so that you can work with the resources and the expectation a lot better. So I think that's one thing, is really going in and saying, hold on, why? The other thing is becoming, a conduit for information. I think it's, it's somewhere where every departmental member of every crew should be able to come in and discover the what that's going on. And simultaneously, I suppose the third thing would be an extension of the first thing, is as you move through the project, you start to answer questions that no one has worked out to ask yet. and you start to see the problems coming down the pipe, and you can see the issues, and so you basically become a lantern or a kind of beacon for how to move forward through the miasma, because you can see the perils of decisions made in absentia or with lack of information. So yeah, I'd say beyond building the world itself, that as a thing that I would advocate, that when I'm talking to producers, like I make the point of, that's what you're hiring. You're hiring someone who's going to nag the ever loving out of you, so.
Amelia, do you want to have a?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I always start with the difficult questions as well. I think I get that a lot from directors of I start with a lot of emotional questions about the character and financial questions about the character, especially with like modern day characters. I just go deep into like, what was their first job? How much did their parents make? Do they, like all sorts of stuff that I wish I could pester real people about all the time, but I get to ask these questions about characters, and it tells me a lot about where the director is coming from, and it tells me a lot about where, how they place somebody in the world. I think if it just says like middle class bedroom suburbia, I'm like, tell me what your experience of that is. Like, let's get closer. So a lot of times those first conversations are really getting to know characters and approaching characters with empathy. Is kind of, that's one of my skill sets, is getting to know all that at the beginning, so that when a set decorator sees a teapot at Goodwill, so I can like communicate all that, and I can be like, yeah, that teapot fits or doesn't fit. And then color is just, like color and history of color, history of like objects. I'm very like a sentimental person, and I think I bring a lot of that into the work that I do. And then I think I end up, another one of my skill sets is like making themes or connections, whether it's just for me to play with, or it's or the director really grabs a hold and gets into it, but it's pulling together pieces of the script or themes that we're going to use throughout, that I don't really know how to articulate this, but just sort of bubbling some of these things up to the surface that are there, that I'm just able to see and connect. So, I think that's three-ish things.
Thanks, Amelia. No, I know. Do you know?
Yeah. So it's interesting that in the look at the history of production designer, it was called art director prior to be production designer. And if you look at those words, production designer and art director, they both have director and production in the title. And we can't lose sight of the fact, much to what we're all saying here, is that there's an element of the job that beyond the creative is really you're a producer, and you have to produce your part of the collaborative effort of a project, of a story. And then the other title, art director, it's like you're directing and producing the visual language of a production, of a show, of a movie, of a TV show, and it's all about storytelling. And so I think it's important when we think about the creative side of the work, which we all have that passion for, but we can't lose sight of what we bring to the project in a level of production. And we have to think like producers, in an effort to get the best resources for your own production, for your own vision. And I think it's important when working with your collaborators, being a director and a producer and a costume designer and a DOP, to have have a vision for what you want to say. What about the story you want to portray visually, and to really hold your ground to that. And it's not always easy. I mean, I think I'm learning every single job I learn. I don't think I ever stop learning, and I've been at it a very long time. I make mistakes all the time. I think we just have to learn and grow from all these experiences. But at the end of the day, we're storytellers and we're visual storytellers. And so I approach TV shows differently than movies only because collaborators are different. In a TV show, it's a producer's medium, and typically you have a director, guest directors come in. So you're sort of working on different levels with different collaborators. And on a movie, you're dealing mostly directly with the director, as your main collaborator, along with the costume designer and the DOP. So I think if I'm approaching a project, I'm always going by the script and the story, and then I see it in my mind's eye, and I create the vision in my own mind, and then I try to share that with my collaborators the best way that I can, utilizing the tools of production and management and all of those other elements that we have to do besides being creatives. So, did I answer? I'm not sure I answered all three, but
no,
That was
absolutely.
great.
And I think also it's the way you said it, Anu, that we are directing, designing, producing the visual storytelling and the world building of the whole production. And just to hear that all in one sentence, to know the kind of scope and magnitude of what production designers and art directors do, is really useful. And I think segueing on to the next question, which is, how do we make sure we know that we are in, the visual storytellers, and we create these worlds, and how important our role is as production designers, but how do we make sure, or what specific practices do we have that ensure that you're respected as a creative in the process? I'd love to hear, I know Blair's got something to share. I know everyone's got something to share in that world. But what have you actually put into practice that makes sure those things are adopted, that you're given the respect that you're deserved?
I'll take
Blair.
this one a little bit. I mean, gosh, that's a big old learning curve there. But I mean, the biggest thing is just communicate, to be clear in what you have to say and what you're trying to do, and communicate with everybody. You are not siloed. You are not just your own department. It's what, from what Jamie and Anu was saying earlier, it's the production part of production designer that is the key to it. Like, we're not doing color by numbers. You're reading something that has been written by somebody that's not limited by the construct of the reality of filmmaking. And so you've got to unpack that and figure out how you can make it with all these other people, make this happen. And it's the ability to speak, and the ability to be able to have empathy and deal with all these other departments and help them do their craft as well, and to not lose sight of that. To not feel the pressure of having to just churn things out. It is so collaborative. That is the biggest thing, is your communication skills, and not being pushed into the corner, standing your ground, taking up space, and being able to listen as well. That's the biggest bow in your arrow, biggest arrow in your hilt. I don't know what that metaphor is. I can't communicate.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to speak to those around you, and play fair and play well with others, and keep a calmness on. And we all make mistakes. Like, every single person makes mistakes. we're backed into a corner with given no soft prep and no time, no margin for error, no way of being able to think. They just want like a magic perfect answer from us right out of the box. That does not happen. That's not reality. So we will all make mistakes, but it's what you do with those mistakes, how you get out of it, and you make that error turn into a beautiful magic moment that you thought of all along. Yes, this was always my ideas. I've always said that. You know, it's taking those moments and turning it into like creative genius. And that's what we are. We are world builders. Nobody can do what we do. And it is a level of genius, but it's you know, you have to be able to wrangle all of that and just have the confidence. And it doesn't come naturally to any single one of us. So it's having nerves of steel.
I was just going to add one thing that Blair touched on then in terms of using your voice, and it's an interesting thing to talk to younger designers and designers who are less sure about their role and about the space they can occupy. And we talked about this at the first gathering as well, about the use of the word no, and an understanding that you're not there to slavishly do as you're told, and to I mean, I will quote Jean Vincent and say disobey, but actually to understand that you're there as a co-collaborator to interpret the words, interpret the script, and kind of there's an education component of your role that you sometimes have to take with your collaborators, because their expectation is, I think, you know, like you're like the gaffer and you'll move the lights, but you'll just do the props in the same vein. And it's kind of like, well, no, that's not what we're doing. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about when occupying that space and learning to use your voice and advocate for yourself. Is you shouldn't be, I would always say, you shouldn't be trying to please everybody. You should be trying to serve the production. You should be trying to serve the script and serve the characters. That's your responsibility. So
Instead of yes and, it's no, but.
I have one that I kind of came across by accident as far as like making sure I'm respected. I was told by a friend never to take a job the night before. You know, if somebody calls you in an emergency, just say no, it's a mess. And somebody called me in an emergency, and I was like, I just gave them an astronomical rate to me, you know, and I gave them the highest rate I'd ever, you know, my overnight fee. And then I came to set and people were like, thank you so much for your time. We're so happy you're here. Do you have 5 minutes? I don't want to disturb you with your time. And it was this thing where it's happened a few times since then where I do have an overnight rate, or like a last minute rate for commercials, music videos, whatever pops up, you know, something where it's an emergency. And I do find that I'm more respected when I have a higher rate. And that is, that was really powerful for me to discover. And I encourage you all to try it. Anybody here who has their, you know, who's especially starting off and has, I remember early on being like, oh, should I charge this rate or should I charge double that? And going back and forth. And it's just like, if you feel like turning something down, try just naming a number. That was a good learning experience.
That's a great one. I've done that too. I've also put certain things like, you know, overtime in my deal memo, and so it's like, oh, we've got, you know, again, we want to respect your time. We'll get you out of here, you know. Anybody else, Tracy or you know, Rose, you know, we'd love to hear from you too. Anything, any little tidbits or like, you know, tips and tricks?
Well, gosh, everyone said so many things that I agree with, especially Blair. I totally relate to that. How can I add on top of that? I guess, I mean, often I will start a project and actually there isn't a script. I'm not sure why this is happening, but I like to get really as soon as I start sometimes before anybody, like it might just be me and the executive producer. So I like to work really closely with the writers to, you know, to build, you know, to create the world, or to come up with the, you know, start off the visual language. I find myself continually always making a lot of mood boards. We call them mood boards, but I guess it's a part of the lookbook. And I'm always I put out imagery all the time. It's like discussion topics that help us find the language, and send them to everybody, even if people haven't started. And then once we're on the production, I like to involve everybody. So I think communication is really key. And you know, no person is not part of it to me. I will talk to anybody. I'll get everyone involved in the production. You know, I'll talk to lighting. I'll just, you know, continually talk with writers. So I think I spend quite a lot of time on that, besides, you know, obviously working with my team and solving all the problems. And like you say, I'm trying to think what else I would add to that. Yeah, everyone sort of covered it, but yeah, I just keep on building that language right from the start, you know, and just keep it going all the way, so that everyone is part of it and everyone knows it, you know, because it's ever evolving, especially if the scripts aren't ready. So, and even when the scripts are ready, often they get rewritten. So I do find that as well. Yeah. I mean, I like everything that everyone said, actually. I agree with everything. Yeah.
I have one
Probably
other
what I
thing
can think of at the moment.
does tie into this issue of scripts, and it's about, I suppose, in terms of like advocating for yourself and kind of what your responsibilities are, and it's to kind of deal with the phrase, can you make that work with your budget? Which we all get hit with like a train at some point. And I think one of the kind of, again, the use of language and definitions about what we're doing is to kind of push that back and say, this isn't my budget. This is your budget. You're the producer. And say, I'm strategizing a way to spend the money to see fit. We need to find a solution together. And really kind of set out that you're there to help them make their project the best it can be and find the solution together, versus, oh, you've got to deliver another set with the money that you've got. And I think there's a real world with old school producers who are just like, you've got to make it work. But in terms of the way that the industry has changed and the way that kind of scripts are developing now, and that goes in terms of like getting ahead of the curve, and you can see when stuff's going to be expensive and problematic on a budgetary sense, and just understanding, okay, how can I talk to them about this? How can I make myself clear? How can I make myself clear that I'm doing the best of my ability? And, you know, and we all have different levels. We're all capable of different things and see the world in different ways and spend money in different ways. But I think kind of shaking off that anxiety of trying to deliver the ridiculous vision for the money that doesn't exist is a real stepping stone as a designer as well, which you know, it comes with experience to be able to say, actually, no, I'm not going to do that thing that I thought I wanted to do because it's going to cost too much, but I've got a better way to tell that story point that's cheaper. So you know, it involves killing your darlings as well. But I think, yeah, an understanding of what your responsibilities are. You're there to manage the budget, but you can't perform miracles, and you can't brutalize yourself and your team to deliver someone else's demands. So.
It's true. It's like every single production is a strategy. And so while you're sort of working out this visual language, you're also working out what the strategy is for actually creating the production. And sometimes that comes down to materiality, or how minimal it's going to be, or, you know, it's coming up with materials that will create that look, but it also will fit that budget, I find, you know. But I quite enjoy the strategic part of it and how we're going to achieve it and how we're going to get this big look from, I don't know, $10 or whatever. But I think that's part of it. There's no two productions the same. You sort of, there's never enough, no matter how big the budget is, I've found too. So even when it's a big budget, you think, oh, I've got a big budget, you know, and maybe you've got 50 people in your team as opposed to 5 on another one. It's never enough. They always somehow, when you've got a team of 50, they want enough, there's enough work for 250. So that's where the strategy comes in, and how to work that out, and how to, you know, organize the time as well to sort of create the work, and how to, you know, maybe affect the shooting schedule and all of those sorts of things. So this just feels like all the time you're continually mobilizing yourself to get the best out of production and make it work your way as well, so that you can get the best out of it, because there's never enough money. Never.
No.
Never had enough
sorry,
money.
I've always got more thoughts, apologies, but also this sense of like the collaboration with departments about understanding how your resources are being spent, or how their resources are being spent, so that like a set might come up and it might be a schedule thing saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to get this set ready because we've got this cast engagement fee and we don't want to engage another cast engagement fee. But it's understanding that when you're speaking to the producers, you have the language to say, well, it's going to cost us 20,000 to deliver this set on this timeline, or to adapt this awful location because it fits the schedule, versus another 2,000 on a cast engagement fee. And it's like, I know you've got a pocket that says you can't go over a certain line, and your producers and your accountants are managing those budgets. But bring it back to this holistic view and say, are we murdering ourselves and hemorrhaging money to make a much smaller budget work better? And just, you know, understanding, I guess it's understanding how the rest of the machine works, like how all of those conversations are made, and why schedules are the shape they are, because they're never really the shape they are for the right reasons. It's always for the wrong reasons. It's always because someone's only available for 2 days on alternate Thursdays, and you have to be up a mountain because they've got an oxygen issue, and you're just like, ah, you know.
So this speaks directly to the fact that we are producers. We actually have a holistic view and approach to things. So to think about how to get the most out of whatever money, or I call it resources, the resources that you're given, how do you manage that? And it's actually looking at the whole production, the schedule, the locations that you're picking, all of that, and the team that you put together is going to then allow you to put the most on the screen, as it were. So, you know, Jamie, really speaking to what Anu was talking about. Rose, I know that you work in different scale spaces. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about managing this.
Like managing budgets, or just the thoughts about how I make
both of these things.
Okay. So, I'll start by saying ways in which I've learned to make my voice heard is I will agree that actually early in my career I said yes too much, and I gotten myself into problems that I just didn't know were problems, you know. And then now I say no a lot more, but I say no, but you know, I do say like, okay, you know, maybe there's another solution, and usually there is. But actually, one of the things that helped a lot was inserting myself into meetings that I wasn't invited to. The more I inserted myself into meetings with the cinematographer and the director, I get that that's their little private time. I don't care. I want it in, and as much as possible, because they're having the conversations that affect me and affect our entire team and all that. And so often they end up being this little like perfect best friend couple. Awesome. But like, I want to have those conversations with both of them so that we can all work as a creative team together. And so I guess for me, the more I inserted myself in those meetings, the more I think they understood, like the less I got asked the ridiculous stuff that they came up privately by themselves, you know, where it was just like, oh, okay, I think, you know, we created a solution in the room during the idea phase, you know, and then, you know, like I inserted myself more into early location scouting that really they should have been bringing me onto, but I think at some production levels they don't understand. how early like I should be involved, like the designer should be involved. And so I made sure that they understood like, oh, okay, well, if you have all your locations, you don't really need me. You're good to go, right? You know? But anyway, that was me being cheeky sometimes. But we try to be jokey with people sometimes just to get them to like get it. Sometimes the more you joke with them, the more I found helped. And the other thing, budget wise, like there was something that Sarah Greenwood, I remember reading that she said something like, a producer asked her like, it was sort of like what Jamie was saying, that asked her, well, you think you're going to be able to do this? Like, are you going to be able to do this? And she's like, I can do absolutely anything if you set me up for success. If you set me up to fail, I can't do it, you know? So one or the other, and we're all going to make like, so now sometimes when I'm on, especially like lower budget or even like a medium budget, but sometimes when they say like, can you do it? I'll be like, well, do you want what you want, or do you want, or can you work with the compromise? Because if you can work with compromise, great on that budget, you know, awesome, we're good to go. But if you really want what you want, let's talk numbers again, you know, because I've noticed that there's two different types. There's people who are willing to go with the flow and like, yeah, we'll make anything work with you. We're going to work together, you know, and then there's the other ones who are like, no, I absolutely need what I need, but I'm not going to give you more money. I'm like, well, how's that going to work? So then we have to have further conversations about all of that. And, but I try to make them understand that I can't, just because you want what you want doesn't mean I can go to Starbucks and buy a coffee for 25 cents, you know? So I don't know, that's sort of how I have to try to nicely and cheekily and like in jokey ways tell them all of this.
It's like wanting a Ferrari and having the money for a you know, like a Toyota or a secondhand Toyota. Like, yeah, we all want a Ferrari, but you can't afford one with that budget. What are you going to do? Yeah.
Rose, I also like what you said about locations. I feel like there have been many times where sometimes you come in and locations have been picked and you're like, well, really part of my job is to help you find locations so that we can realize the world together. And also I can help you save money. I always try and insert that little, and I can help you save money if I'm involved in all of the conversations with the DP, because you can go and create your own thing, but like, I'm the one that has to make it, you know, build the world for you. So include me and we can come to some, like you said, compromise. And I think that segues perfectly into like, how do we have these conversations with producers that basically makes sure that your vision is also included, you know, because I've come into actually this indie I just did where they had started with locations and they had started with certain things, and I'm like, oh, and I even had the director like making a logo at some point, and I'm like, oh, where did that logo come from? And they're like, you know, they were like AI, and I was like, I almost fainted, and I said, that's gross, please don't do that. That's what I'm here for. You know, you have to educate people. But, you know, so for me, it was with them a learning experience and teaching them what I was there for, why I was going to give them the best production value in the world, and how I could save them money, all of those three things. So we've all been there, right? So how do you work with your producers and, you know, to sort of make sure that happens?
I could jump in. So yeah, also touching on what Rose said, and I think this ties into what you're saying, Miranda, is that it's really important to look at the whole production calendar and the schedule and the daily schedule and look at the meetings. As Rose said, you know, push into meetings that you might not be on, or you know, ADs typically make the prep schedule. And if you're not on a meeting schedule, if you're not in that meeting scheduled, like for instance, special effects, oftentimes the production designer is not listed on a special effects meeting sometimes even a prop meeting. And I will push in on these meetings because I find it's all this one part of, it's all part of one visual language, you know, special effects done poorly with just blowing up something without understanding material and how and physics and how something might actually look as it blows up. You have to push in on these things and make yourself heard by your experience as a visual artist and your understanding of how you want something to look, because a special effects person might just be wanting to, like I said, like blow it up, and that's great. That's their job. But it's not their job to know, you know, how, or be the only one who would make it look good. So, you know, there's special effects, there's visual effects is another one where I think a lot of designers are becoming a lot more involved in at different levels. And, you know, unfortunately at the moment in post-production, some designers are gaining ground there where you can be involved, but oftentimes it just ends at RAT, your involvement in visual effects. So I think that's an area that I think we're, as a collective, we're all really working on to try to, again, it's all part of the visual language, and why shouldn't the designer be a part of that? So again, it's like as the production is moving along, it's really being clued into what is happening every day, and also what's coming up, and staying aware of when these meetings are. Rose, you're absolutely right. When a DP and a director meet and you're not involved in a conversation, sometimes, you know, you have to give them space. I get it. There's a lot, sometimes it's technical stuff they're talking about. That's great. But if it's, you know, I always want to be in a shot listing meeting because you're gaining so much information. TV shows are really difficult because a designer is in a TV show, you're prepping, shooting, wrapping, you're prepping with one director and another director is shooting. So, you know, sometimes there's one DP, two DPs. So it's like going to every meeting is impossible. Going to every shot listing is impossible sometimes. But it's even trying to get the information after they've shot listed, and what did you see, and sitting down with a plan, even if it's just a sketch, and saying, where's the camera going to look? And sometimes the director doesn't know, and that's okay. But then you have to say, well, going back to budget, we don't have, you know, you have to kind of communicate all these things at the same time, that you're, you know, working with everyone in your department. So we're often like firing on all cylinders all the time, and it sounds daunting. And quite honestly, you know, I feel like if anyone ever told me, like, starting out in this business, what a production designer actually has to do, I probably wouldn't have done it. But, you know, we all like are here because we love it and we love collaborating, and we're all nerds. And I think it's, you know, it can be incredibly rewarding, and be a squeaky wheel.
Yeah, I was going to add that note about like shot listing. Oh, sorry. Just thinking about like with shot listing and storyboard, you always get people saying, "Oh, it's not ready yet," or the draft isn't ready on the script, or, "Oh, I've just got some scribbles in my notebook," and it's like, we are a visual department. Like, I can pass what you're aiming at. Like you can give me the most appalling storyboards and it will give me information that I have been aching for as a designer. You know, and again, it's that thing. It's like, I'm not the financiers. I don't need impressed. Like, you know, sitting with a director and getting them to just make a mark and say, okay, what when it says this in the script, we can only afford so much. What do you need to see? Can you draw me a board? And it's like, I'm not going to hold you to it, but I need to understand the scale of your shot design or your staging. I think one of the most productive projects I did was a show called Bodyguard in 2018, and my director for Block 1 would do camera plans in prep for every scene, and he'd write notes of where each character started in the scene emotionally and then in plot terms, and that was his preparation, was to work out how he was going to direct it. So I've still got the PDFs on my computer with these reams of information that were just gold dust for discovering what the requirements of the set were. So you could actually just go, I don't need to bother. We're just going to be on a park bench. It's fine. Like all the things that are going on in the head, that production think they need to do a road closure and all this sort of stuff. It's like he's no interest in that. It's about two characters close up. So let's just go and find a park. So it's kind of, it kind of builds those relationships with those collaborators who can communicate and kind of let them give you the hideous version of it, I suppose.
The last job I was on that I was talking about, we were shooting in Africa. I actually had production change my hotel so that I could be in the same hotel as the DP and the director, because they had me with costume and which is all great. But just by me staying there, like when we wrapped at night, we would all sit there in the bar and go to dinner, and that's where I got any information. I mean, everything that we did in prep, everything that we said on the bus, everything we did just flew right out the window. It was what happened at the end of the day. They would start making new little plans about what they were going to do next day. And if I wasn't a fly on the wall in that conversation and then became actually part of that conversation, it would have been a game over for me. Do you know? But I had to get moved and be there. Like it wasn't crucial that I be part of that trifecta. And so yeah, you do have to just take the ownership of that and just make those things happen.
Yeah, and that's a great example again, Blair, of like asking or making sure that you are part of those conversations. Like, hey, I'd really like to move and be in vicinity with everyone else, don't be afraid to ask, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, in prep, like they come to you every single day. You're right at the center of everything, I find. And then as soon as it starts shooting, it becomes about the director and the DOP. And then you've got to keep making sure or trying to stay in that process, because it's almost like not a divorce, but it's like somebody new come along, because often the DOP will start later and the director's all over you to come up with all the solutions for everything. But as soon as the DOP comes on board, it's like you've just got to, it's quite hard, but you've got to keep on every day, making sure that you're still part of that. I feel everyone struggles on that.
I would say just make sure you go for lunch. Like if there's crew lunch, make sure you turn up and sit next to the director every day. Like just create meetings where they don't exist. Just be like, oh, okay, how are we doing? As soon as they get there, meet them for coffee. Just because it's the stuff that what kills everybody on a shoot is the stuff people forget to tell each other.
Yeah.
I think I've found in recent years, I think I was often stuck trying to get the attention of the director, or like we're two like the DP and I are like two siblings just trying to like get the director's opinion. And a few years ago I switched that and I started just asking the DP questions directly and sort of involving them from the start. One question that I found really helpful, it's kind of basic, and I'm always kind of embarrassed to ask it, but it's just like, what do you like to shoot? Which is something you think you can suss out from their portfolio, but it's not. I'll get different answers every time. So one DP will say like, I like sparkly stuff in the background. I really like working with that guy, but he like was like specifically like twinkle lights or spray some water on some plants so they glisten, like that sort of stuff. Somebody else will say like textures. Somebody else really likes foreground stuff. I start collaborating with the DP, and then the director is like, hey, you guys are having a meeting without me? Like there's like there are three of, I've seen it more as like a group of three, and a lot of times I'm thrown onto a shoot and it's the normal, like the traditional relationships. But on something longer, I really do try to build this genuine collaboration or friendship that I don't think that they know there's some animosity there, but I feel that from production designers all the time, of saying, how difficult it is to work with the ego of a DP. But I try to try to like get rid of that as much as possible. But it's a lot easier to just become their friend instead of compete.
I think that thing of rocking up and being a voice who's not in the chaos of the actual shoot, and just being like, hey, what about, and kind of, I was talking to James Chinland, who were doing the talk on Wednesday, and it's going to come up in that, but this sense of like, you have to let go of the floor itself. And so you kind of need to create a space where you're not responsible for the day as it's happening, but you're still in their mind's eye someone who can fix the future. And it's just like, let go of the day. As soon as you hand it over to the standbys and the props, like, just that day is not yours anymore. You don't get to have the conversation. So don't get sucked into it, but be about what's coming next. Keep presenting yourself as the person. And one of my oldest friends, who I've done a number of films with, kind of his description of my role is that I have to occupy his mental space 6 weeks before he does. It's like, I have to be him thinking about where we're going to be, what we're going to see, what we're going to shoot, who the characters are, what are they going to do, where do they come from, what are they doing after the scene, and just have that, and just try and remind people while they're shooting, because the live performance of a shoot where everyone's on playing in real time, the boom op, the makeup standbys, everyone's responding in real time, can be so all encompassing. But it's also just to say, no, there's this other thing still going on that was going on long before you came. So it's like, how do you remind them you're there for them, but also simultaneously just go, do as you will. It's like, I'm not going to have any ego about how this day goes, because it's not mine anymore. So
If I could quote, I worked with Bob Shaw, art directed a project with him, and he he famously said, the shooting crew are like teenagers. You want to know what they're doing, but you really don't want to know what they're doing. So, but yeah, letting go. I think that's a good point. Not taking things personally probably is something I've had to learn a lot about. And then building confidence around that, right? Because we hear a lot about this where production designers can feel, pushed aside, but if you don't feel pushed aside and you are there and present and not taking it personally, show up every day, even though, you might not be invited, it speaks something, it says something different to your collaborators other than, feeling left out. So I've had to learn that. I really had to learn that the hard way, of having the confidence and not taking it personally.
it will also deflate blame as well. Your
Yeah.
presence and your proactive nature of what you're trying to do for them, and particularly standby teams, like the separation between the standby crew and the buyers, and everyone gets adversarial about what we need. And it's that thing of, within your department as well, telling the backroom team to be present on set in the morning, just to see how they're doing, let them know you've got their back, because it can be very easy for the them and us mentality to build between what's happening on the shoot and what's happening in the office or in the construction workshop or in the next stage. And you need everyone to feel that they're still in this. And again, it's a complete battle, because you're fighting that real, live circus that's going on. And, they're all fire eaters and clowns as far as I can tell. So it's like, you need to get past yourself and know there's going to, like you say, take a few things on the chin and just step into it and be like, well, here's what's next week, guys. What do you think?
Anyone else want to elaborate on that? I mean, in some ways it's making ourselves indispensable as well, like making sure that we are coming up with solutions, and so that they know who to come to. And I think one of the things we wanted to touch on is an area that has been successful. Like, if you have success stories where you have sort of stood up for yourself, or you have asserted your authority as a production designer, and it's actually gone really well, and you've gotten all the things that you wanted from soup to nuts. It's rare, I know, But can we share some of our success stories instead of the, typical, well, I wasn't included in this conversation, I didn't get to do visual effects, and somebody made a logo with AI and just told me about it. What are our success stories here? How have we like, do we have any of those? I'm sure we do.
Well, it's finding, sometimes it's like, you're reading something and you're going out on recce's and you're looking at these locations and nothing at all is working, and you can't really afford or be able to fit into a schedule what would actually be on paper perfect. And it's being, having this, I've had some great success stories of saying, okay, well, what if we look at this, instead of having a penthouse, what about it's a sweatshop, and it's what he's doing in the background, like leaning into somebody's backstory and giving that a moment to come out. And sometimes what was written might be able to like provide some sort of catalyst for the character, but if you lean into something else and you've come up with that, and you have to speak to the writer about it, you have to speak to the director about it and say, what if we did this and like develop this part of the backstory? It could be something that's really interesting, and sometimes that's led to a particular moment actually being really iconic within that production, that never was really meant to have its day. And that was you that's come up with that, just by being able to think out of the box and say, I'm going to make this place work because we're here, we can't have a unit move, and this is what we have. But here's how we can fit this into the story and develop on that and make it, again, a happy accident. Like working with different locations is something that I see production designers do all the time. Be able to say, yes, no, but yes, and this is what we will do, but it's going to have to change. And it's been quite successful. We're brilliant at that.
I mean, I would say that sense of like pivoting, I can't really pull a prime example to the front, but one of the things I talk about when I'm meeting collaborators is I'm going to do a pass of the script and I'm going to get rid of the scene headings. And I'm just going to work out how I feel about where things are taking place, just so I've got some ammo for when it goes tits up. Like, just so I've got like an alternate version of the scene that I could pitch you when the unit move can't happen or we need to cram something in. And it's that sense of like being able to be nimble enough to embrace an opportunity and kind of say, well, we thought in the script it says this, but I'll bring up Bodyguard for example. Well, we've got this rooftop location, but we've got this amazing views looking out over the city, and we didn't want that initially. It was going to be from a window, and it was a sniper, and that leads to our lead actor covered in blood at the end of the shooting day, standing on a rooftop, being lit by the practical emergency vehicles down on the street below. No one wanted that shot. No one wanted that thing. It was in every trailer. It was the iconic image. And that was just one of those things where we pivoted and were like, yeah, it says this and it should do this, but what about if we did this instead? And it just opened up that whole shooting day as it ended up, into something different, into something which was genuinely more iconic. And I suppose as designers, I would always pitch like, be bold with that. And it's not to kind of give writers a bad name, but we've all done projects where the writers are writing their world, and one show particularly where the plotting was amazing and the drama was fantastic, but the setting was very pedestrian. And so we ended up pitching these intense visuals and pushing things and going for this really kind of high key kind of neon look. And one of the successes of that was the DP pitching that he was like, I'm going to change every street lamp to magenta in the entire show. And everyone was like, how is that going to look realistic? And you're kind of just going, doesn't matter. If that's the world of the show, that's the world of the show, and the audience will go with us. So again, kind of being cavalier a little bit with the scene headings resulted in an aesthetic which gave the show a real identity, which it just would not have had we tried to deliver what was written. So.
Yeah, I had a similar story on your friends and neighbors where on the page it was speaking to both what you're saying, Jamie and Blair, that what was written on the page was a restaurant with two characters, and it was supposed to be, a high-end midtown, restaurant, and the director was always discussing about how the main characters you should sympathize with them more. And I that stuck with me in prep. And then, when it popped up as this, high-end restaurant, and of course all the producers are like, when you rent a restaurant in Manhattan, I'm not kidding, it's like $100,000 a day. It's ridiculous. And I was like, well, what about a little sandwich shop? You want to make the character more believable, that he's, that you want to feel for him a little more. Maybe his ritual is he goes to a little sandwich shop and gets his pastrami sandwich. And the director was like, yes, that's it. So it's like, same thing. We're talking about the same thing. It's like, don't just read what's on the page. Think about the character and the story. And then, by the way, just saved the production $95,000. Anyway, so that kind of thing. Exactly.
I just wanted to say, when I was working in sketch, one of the biggest things that I learned was how quickly I had to move and how much I had to pivot. That's all I did all day long. Was I had to make a million decisions a day, because you're shooting at least 3 sketches a day and you don't get to do unit moves. So you have to just, like, I would look into a space and be like, what 2 walls work? Okay, what window works? What door works? Okay, where's the entrance? You're figuring all this stuff out so that, I remember one sketch where the entire joke was the refrigerator at the very end of the sketch has to just fall down onto the ground out of nowhere. But of course, they started scouting real places, and I was like, you know how much damage we're gonna do with that? Like, how many people are gonna want a refrigerator smashing on their floor? I was like, this is kind of a build. But of course they were like, we don't have money for a build, we can't do it. And I was like, okay, so what do we have access to? We were working in an office that we knew was going to be demolished when we left. So I said, okay, let me build it in the writer's room. I can build it in the writer's room. We'll smash the fridge. It'll be great. And that's what we did. I put up some cupboards. I did a kitchen. I did, as long as I had the kitchen, it would work. I was like, so we built that part. It was not that expensive. We did reused cupboards, and, all of it was mostly material reuse. And yeah, and then we did it. We smashed this fridge, and I was like, good, and yet sure enough, the floor did get damaged, just like I thought it would. And so I showed them after. It was like exactly what I said would happen happened. And but yeah, I was really proud of it, because in the end it is when I look back, one of my favorite sketches, because the joke works. Because otherwise sometimes you shove, like, especially in sketch comedy, you shove a joke where it doesn't belong, and guess what, the joke doesn't work anymore. But there was all kinds of things like that. Like, one time I remember going into a space, and then we just needed a little prison cell, but it was like there was absolutely no small rooms. So I looked at it, like, a corner, and it was just like some cinder block, and I was like, okay, let's do that. And then I talked to the DP. I said, can you use this door, this one random door, to just peek through, and we'll do a French reverse. And they were like, French reverse? I was like, yeah, let's do it. And they were like, they figured it out, and sure enough, that worked. Like, it was just the simplest thing that we then didn't have to move all the way across town just to get a tiny room, So it's that type of thinking that I really appreciate. And if you could do sketch comedy, if you ever get the chance, I recommend it, because you'll think, like, all the time, like, just how can I make this work constantly? Yeah.
I was going to say, you're just talking about flats and stuff. There's a film I did which came out this year, I think, called Out of Darkness, and it's prehistoric thriller. It's a good movie, but the end of it is like 30 minutes underground, taking place in this massive cave structure, and the budget for the cave build was about 32,000. That's all they had. And so I was like, okay, well, you can't have what's written, but what you can have is the impression of what's written. So we just built modular flats, and every single camera, every new setup was a new set build to the lens of the existing scenery. So while grip and lights got set, the set would get set every single time. And it was one of those things that kind of no one in the production beyond, I think, the director and the producer, Wendy, kind of had any faith in. But they were just like, Jamie, you know what you're talking about. We'll do it. And I remember the DP, who's wildly successful, like incredulous that this would fail miserably. And, you know, like what happens when we shoot off? It's like nothing. It's just black. Like there is no light. We're a mile underground. And then that first setup on camera, and everyone's like, oh my God, this actually works. And it's like, well, of course it does. Like, you know, you might see me as a lunatic, but a kind of grounded lunatic, you know. But I think that thing again of like, okay, the script has them go through a narrow thing and crawl over a thing. And it's like, I can't build any of that because that is all of a sudden 6, 7, 8 big long sets. And it's like, okay, well, what if it's like obsidian glass underground? Well, it's just reflections. And it was that concept of like, we're making points of view cinema, like it is one angle. We can do anything.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to creating solutions in real live worlds, I think we're actually sometimes a little, because we deal with the physical, sometimes we know what works versus the DP or even the director, right? Because we actually know how to build it. We know we're constantly thinking about how you build things, how you know, create the look. And so I think being, you know, problem solvers that way creates, you know, our not only a relationship with your director and your DP, but like, you know, it's creating that thing which I was talking about, the being indispensable, you know, sort of saying, look at it this way. I know how to build it because that's part of my job, so that you can get the look that you want. So sort of move, and I think we're almost there. I think I want to leave like maybe 10 minutes for questions. Does that sound good, Fiona?
Yep. That's great.
And if people want to ask questions, and I think the last part of this, I mean, we haven't really touched upon the sort of nuts and bolts of like, you know, rates and overtime and deal memos and stuff like that. But I think I can cover that a little bit later. But really, we wanted everybody to give their own definition of what being a production designer is, and you know, what you do, what we are doing in our IAPDC as well to advocate for each other. And just if we could get something from everyone, like a little couple of sentences, that would be really great. Just what, in your own words, really.
And if you've got any questions for the panels, do you want to put them in the chat,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we'll feed them to the feed them to the panelists after they've done their little roundup. Yeah. Okay. Amelia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess if I'm at like a Christmas party or something, and somebody's like, "What do you do?" I'll say I'm a production designer, which means I'm in charge of all the stuff you see on camera that's not the people and the stuff that they're wearing. And the lighting, but then sometimes it is the lighting, or the sets that I build, or I design, like shape the lighting. So I'm just, it is such an overwhelming job description that I've just come up with that like tiny summary for like, are you interested in talking more about this or not? But then as far as the job description itself goes, it is really like there's so many people skills and negotiation skills that I've developed over the years. I thought that when I was starting off, I thought that I needed to be able to draft spaces and create a mood, and that was the job. And now it's so much more, as far as developing relationships, organizing people, organizing my own thoughts, constantly revising, being flexible, and changing. And I don't know, I think I could ramble about it for like 20 minutes, but that's, I think being flexible and coming up with solutions, sometimes not even in your own department, because you're trying to move the story forward visually. Yeah. Anybody else?
It is just that, I mean, we've kind of gone over everything in that department, but it is coming up with a visual language, and that's, be it the overall story arc, the overall visual arc, what things look like, even as far as to bleeding out into how something is marketed. Storytelling could have lots to do with color. It could have a lot to do with emotion that you bring into something that you put on the set. It is taking over everything that's going to define the viewer's journey and what they see on screen. And all the responsibility of how that unpacks is all falling squarely on your shoulders. And it's a lot to think of. Back what Anu and Amelia said, it's like, if I would have thought about what this all was in the very beginning, I probably might have gone, nope, I'm going to move out of this one. But it is quite a big responsibility. It's everything visual in that language, and then some.
I'd say, kind of beyond those two kind of ideas, it's a dry run at telling the story. That's the one thing we really get to do, and we really get the chance to explore all those nuances and avenues of character in a way that other people really don't until they've got the actors. Do you know what I mean? Like we get to play with that. We get to imagine how those things are going to play out. And you hear directors talk about, they see the film in their mind's eye, and it's kind of something we have to do. Like, even if we don't have that instinct naturally, to be able to work it, you end up mechanically creating it. You create the wall, you create the vision, you create the journey through the characters, and in doing so, you see opportunities and you see insights that no one else thought. And beyond that, it's leading a team and helping people understand like how much they're capable of. Like, and it's, your expectation or my expectation is always more than anyone thinks we can do. And I will always push us beyond what we think our capabilities are, but kind of just helping people unlock that in themselves, and like, kind of nurture that ability to kind of take ownership and go, look what we did, guys, look at this is amazing. So
yeah, such a big subject to talk about, obviously. And I mean, obviously we're taking the scripted world, and then we're creating the visual world, and we're trying to create a visual world where we truly can connect the story to our audience. But it's everything that everyone said. I agree with everything. It's actually just being really, really present all of the time. And it's like there's so much that you do that's unspoken. It's like nobody says when you start a job what you're going to be doing, but it's just like you're always there. If any ideas, backing your team, backing the people on set, and you're just there to realize that vision, really. I mean, and that's more than just the design side of it and all the communication. It's sort of all the gaps. It's all the gaps in between as well. So, I mean, I'm sort of saying the same thing as Jamie in a funny way, but it's just too big to talk about, isn't it? We do need to get it down to one sentence, though, don't we? We need
not
a really
not a chance.
I was thinking, we can come up with a good line and then a byline.
But then Tracy, that actually says what it is we do is so vast in a way, isn't it? That it really speaks to the vastness of, Rose, sorry.
Well, the one thing I was just thinking is sometimes actually when I get really way too in my head, way too stressed out, the one thing that I do always fall back in my head to calm myself down a little bit is just like, I have to just fulfill the 3 S's. So for me, that's story, space, and suspension of disbelief. So how is the story fitting the space? Does it? Did I complete that? And does it suspend disbelief? And so as long as I fulfilled those, I can calm myself down. So in my simplest form, that's what I say to myself.
I'm just looking at some of the questions. I mean, I think everyone has said, I don't want to necessarily repeat, because I think I agree, and I think everyone has said the last question, but I'm looking at the Tesla, is that right? In terms of interdepartmental structure, communication, and then also someone who's difficult in your team. So yeah, I mean, being a manager, yeah, we're managers. You have to manage people. You have to manage personalities. You manage up, you manage down. I think communication with the decorator is very different than communication with the construction coordinator, only because they're just two different languages. But research. And I don't come from decorating, so I respect it as a craft that I had to like learn. So I give a lot of respect to the decorators I work with, but it's always about researching and using the research to communicate the ideas. And the construction coordinator really comes through my work with my art director, who would interpret the drawings and set design. And then the difficult people, I think it's really important to give people feedback if you're not happy with someone, and talk with them, communicate. It's always about communication. If you have a difficult person, sit with them in your space, whether it's an office, or find a space where you can be alone. You never want to gang up on someone but if you have a difficult person, you really want to find out what's going on with that person and identify where they're having problems. I often believe that if someone who's working for me doesn't understand what I want, it may be that I'm not communicating it correctly. So I find that I will have to repeat myself, and I'm okay with repeating myself. I tell people that work for me, if you don't understand something, please ask me. Don't just try to do it, or don't get upset. You can never ask a dumb question. You can never ask me, you can't ask me enough times the same question. I don't mind. I really don't mind. If you do mind, and I've worked with directors and producers like that, I find that irritating because you're not really solving problems. So in order to keep a good workflow with your crew, really be open and communicative, and give your crew space and agency to ask questions over and over and over again until they get the right answer.
Yeah, I'd say it's that thing. If someone is heading down the wrong track on something, I always try and articulate that. If there's a mistake in my department, I've not made myself clear. I mean, that's my own kind of, Catholic guilt from back in the day kicking through, but it's that sense of, if I'm not clear about what my expectations are, then I can't be surprised that people aren't getting it. So that sense of communication, and there's a concept of knowledge bias, where you think something's really clear because you have all the information surrounding it, and you think you've given enough for someone to interpret what you want, and you haven't. And it's very hard to see that. It's very hard to see that. And it just means, as a line manager as well, asking people, like, genuinely, there is no right or wrong answer, but do you understand what the ask is? Like, are my expectations clear? And simultaneously being unafraid of saying that it's not finished. Like, when someone presents something and they're convinced in their head that they've done enough work, having the confidence to just say, no, like, you need to revisit this, take another look. Here are the things that you're maybe not seeing, because I guess as designers, what we all will have in common is an ability to see and pass the world around us, and to understand how it's put together and what makes things real, which does set us apart. And you can't expect everybody to have that level of insight into the physicality or the reality of something. So it's like, okay, well, here's what you're not seeing, or here's something to kind of do. I was just gonna answer slightly the question about, you know, when you first read a script, what's the first thing you do? It's like, well, research, obviously, like a maniac, just lose yourself. But also, one of the things that's really powerful, I would find, is to try and find your own brief for the design within the script. Try and find something that speaks to you that isn't written in the words, that is possibly backstory of a character, or something that overarchingly, thematically speaks to the journey of a character, so that you can build aesthetic design ideas on an intellectual problem, on an intellectual solution that you can articulate to others and they can then interpret. I think Rose mentioned something saying about, you know, if a buyer sees a teapot or a mug, if you've given them the roadmap of who those characters are, your crew can start making decisions on your behalf that will be correct to the storytelling. You might have a color preference, but they'll be right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, you know, a lot of like work on the script, go through it more times than you want to. And I hate having to do that myself. You know, I'm like, oh my God. But that sense of, how do I navigate this? How can I illuminate what's in the story? How can I play with things like color scripts, and what you're looking for is the thing that's not right on the page. You're looking for something deeper that you can use as an anchor. And something that I would always say is always really useful, if you can articulate that clearly, if it's supporting a design solution that is maybe problematic in terms of finances, you're kind of in a position of strength, because they can't argue with you. You know what I mean? Like your point of view is about character, it is about story, and you're saying, here is an articulation of that. And it also means that if that can't be done, you've got to pivot to the £5, $5 version that still articulates the same story point, so you can deliver the idea across budgets.
Yeah, if I could also just I agree with you 100%, Jamie, and also some of the techniques that I use is take a entry point into a story through character, as Jamie said, and really find something that's not written. And then it's almost like you mine for things, you know, you kind of like you find a vein of something. Um, because it's collaborative, you also want to talk with either the writer or the producer, showrunner, or director, to make sure you're going down the right path. And if you are going down the right path and they like the idea, just keep mining and finding things about the character that can then inform the spaces that you're designing for the character. I'll just do two quick examples. The last project I did, there was a character who was a shipping magnate, and the only description was that they were very wealthy and that they owned a shipping company. So I just had to take that and then build my own backstory about the character, so that I could inform how I design the spaces and the things that the character owns and the objects that they own. And the details are so important when it comes to that, and building, designing sets. And another thing that we did on the same project was the characters who had wealthy characters that had art collections. And in order to build the right art collection for each character, my decorator and I created basically profiles and timelines when a certain character obtained their wealth and at what point they would have purchased art, and at in a certain time frame, so that would inform which artists would be in their collection. And that was not written anywhere in the script, or was it necessarily important to the story for the producers or the showrunners or writers, but it's important to designing the spaces that they characters occupy. And you know, you'll find when your collaborators learn what you're doing and the detail that you're picking out within the character, they're really happy because you're adding value to this whole story, to the whole character.
I do
I
a
think
similar
one of the
thing.
benefits. Oh, sorry.
Okay. I'll do quick.
Go.
I mean, sometimes, you know, when you start a project, you don't want to rely on any of the cliches, if you like, or any of the things that you've necessarily done before. You want to sort of start really fresh. I mean, I'll look at everything. I always look at paintings and sculptures. I won't necessarily look at other film projects. I'll also just rifle through all sorts of different types of magazines, and I'll just, yes, yes, yes. And I'll just grab all these different things, even if they're just really random things, and then I'll sort of lay them all out. And they might be a bit of a rock from here and a bit of a leaf, or, you know, that car or this painting. And then somehow you can just look at all of those things and you can start to see the beginning of a pattern, or just, I don't know, I guess I'm always looking for patterns, but I think that's how I can start and not, you know, not rely on something that I did, because you can sometimes read the script and you think, I'll just follow it, but no, it's all the gaps in between. And sometimes to do that, you just have to find things from somewhere else, you know, grass, you know, somewhere out, things out in the world, and bring them all together, and you can start to see a materiality or a color. Colors often come really quick to me. I'm like, I don't know why, but yellow is everywhere. So anyway, that's what happened for me anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, just on the back of what Anu had said, it's that thing of, if you get a set right and you do that character work in it, then the cast, like the sense you get back from them stepping onto the set and understanding more about who their character was. You know, even that thing, I remember I did a film like nearly 15 years ago, and we built this petrol station up in the Highlands of Scotland, and we built it from scratch, and it had a house off the back of it, and there was hot water and heating, and we did everything. And I'd had the script for about a year. It was the joy of indies, basically. Like, while we were funding, we had the script and we worked out the layout in a kind of like theatrical sense about, we need to walk from here, and we kind of workshopped who the characters were. But we kind of, when we built the house, we went into all of this detail and we made it fully functional, and all the drawers were full, and the sock drawer in the girls' bedroom was full. And it was very, you know, one of the earliest projects I'd done, but all of the cast felt they could live in the set. And when they opened a drawer, they could make a meal. And it was just this thing where they kind of afterwards said it felt like another character. And that was just like, oh my God. But it was that discovery of, okay, I need to go away and write backstories on a very simple sense. I suppose to answer the question really quick, succinctly, would be a great thing is to just write backstories for your characters of your own. And like you say, Anna was saying, like, find out when they got their money, when they went to school, who their first love was, and just make it up. But you'll start to create structure and mechanisms that allow you to tell the story that you want to tell as a designer. So it's a very, you know, fun, and it's good if you've got someone on your team. I mean, the first time we ever did that was on an indie feature in like 2009, and myself and the set deck, we had like, I think we had about 40 grand for the entire budget, but we went and sort of lived it with the director for a week before prep started, and prep was only 3 weeks because it's a, you know, tiny budget. And we just sat with him and we just wrote character biogs, and he thought it was the best thing on earth, because in his head he kind of had a feeling in the sense of who they were in the moment, but we gave it all this extra backstory and we created this world for these characters, so that was a full etymology back to when the company they worked for was founded in 1903. You know what I mean? And it was just that sense where you can then become confident in your design choices, because you know what it is you're doing, you know what it is you're trying to say.
I think I've tried so many of these approaches, and I think every time I get a script, I sort of break it down in a different way. I'm a very active reader, and I definitely like highlight, underline, you know, and I'm trying to like pull things together. But I've definitely done the thing I find that if I get away from the computer, sometimes that really helps. So like what Tracy is talking about, of just being like, here are the different piles. Once I was really in a bind and I had no visual materials, and I went to a Lowe's and just got all the paint chips. And I was like, oh yeah, this belongs to this character, this belongs to this character, this is their kid, this is the grandma, and then just sort of like started it with the limitations of just being like, what's happening with these paint chips and some like random pieces of fabric that I had. Like, can I develop these characters and then from there take those instructions and use the internet to find more visuals? The other things that I've done is just taken like the 90-page script and been like, wow, this I worked on like a sci-fi road trip movie, and it occurred to me a lot of it happened at night. And I was just trying to figure out how much of this is in the night and how much is, and there was this like supernatural glowing tornado spike thing from the sky that I had to design. And I was like, basically I took like a normal a spreadsheet, like a grid, like a grid of paper. And I was just like, okay, dark color, light color, dark color, light color, to just see over 90 pages, what is the wave? Like, what is the pattern here? And then if I'm infusing it with color, if I'm saying we're using sodium lights for street lamps and we're using a purpley milky glow for the tornado thing, how does that change just this whole overarching thing? So I kind of, there's so many ways to break down a script, and sometimes the script speaks to the way that you should be reacting to it. But I think it's always like 3 or 4 passes for me until I actually understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's active reading and sort of doing these different brain teaser tasks, whatever I need to figure out what's happening, and trying not to be distracted by oh no, that's going to be difficult. You know, there's always going to be some things where you're like, I've got to solve this problem right now, but just try to hold off and shape the thing.
Yeah, I think what you were just saying then, that idea of doing a color script is really powerful, where you literally look at the timeline and it's like a page per cell or a scene per cell on a spreadsheet, and you can do it in Photoshop or whatever, and kind of plotting out the overarching colors. And I remember I did a film and we'd done all the research and we had all the overriding moods for each location and scene, and then kind of just doing some color analysis and picking a color that represented each in holistically. And then when we looked at it as a color script, we realized that there was a whole section where the characters went through 3 countries, yet the overarching color scheme was the same and all the scenes took place at night. And I remember saying to the writer, I was like, we need to put a daytime scene in there and we need to show them moving. Because if anyone blinks or looks at their phone while they're watching this, or goes for the bathroom, they are not going to understand our characters have moved, because the tonality is going to be the same no matter what we do with the lighting schemes, because it's night, it's a Central European city. And so that was one of those ones where, again, trying to find an into a script, making a color script and going, hold on, from like page 30 to page 60 will look like one scene unless we start breaking it up and we start to think about different color things we can do, and then speak to the DP about, well, what could we do with the locations and change the nature of the street light, the sodium versus kind of LED or things like that. So
fantastic. I'm going to get to one of the questions we've got on here, which I actually really love. It's right up my alley, which is how do you balance asking / pushing for your deserved rate and showing that you really want to be part of the project? So how do you sort of what you were talking about, Amelia, and sort of saying, if it's a project that you know is going to be a nightmare, do the most like to the moon rate that you could ever get. But when you want to be part of it, how do you still maintain, this is what I need to get paid, this is what my worth is? Yeah, any insight on that from everyone?
Well,
Uh,
oh yeah, go ahead, Rose.
I'll just say that something that this was something I struggled a lot with because I did a lot of low budget, a lot of non-union in the beginning, and now, and yeah, I remember at some point asking a bunch of designers this, and I can't remember who told me this, but they said, listen, you need to start thinking about it differently, and they said, if you really truly want to negotiate and you want to, they told me to think about it like you you can't truly negotiate if you're not willing to lose the job. And so I thought to myself, so once I got that through my head where I was like, because I had to start advocating for myself because I really was getting taken advantage of. And so at a certain point, I just said, you know what? No, my time is worth more than they're trying to give me the vast majority of the time. I'm willing to lose this. That being said, I could still word it in a way where I still say, this is the rate. I'm willing to work with you a little bit. Let's talk. And I try to talk with them on the phone because generally they can get a sense of your voice and like they get a sense of you, whether you're going to work well, whether you have the right ideas. You can talk, just there's so much things you can say in the phone conversation. But through email, it ends up being like, this person's strict, and it's a very strict budget or like, very strict on their rate or whatever. And I just found that if I could I had to change my mentality of being willing to lose it to keep to a rate. Like I won't go lower than a certain amount, but then also trying to get them on the phone was the biggest thing that changed. Like now it's like, no matter what, it's like, I answer the question, but more vaguely. And I say, well, let's talk on the phone and then I can give you a true quote,
Right. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that astronomical rate is really the one where it's like, this is gonna take up all my time and stress me out, and I will eat, breathe, and sleep the shoot for the next whatever amount of time. That's when I'm like, pay me a ton of money so that I can, just focus on getting it done. Otherwise, some questions that I ask. I mean, I honestly think it's unfair when a producer says, "What's your rate?" They should be telling you what the rate, they know the rate. So like they should tell you what it is, but you do get the like, what's your rate? If they tell me a rate and it's low, I'll say, is that comparable to what other department heads are making? Especially if it's one of these, sometimes on low budget stuff, you'll get a flat rate and they'll say, if they say truly every department head, DP included, is getting the same rate, then you can assess what the project is worth. I personally I choose one pro bono sort of job a year, and that's a personal decision, but that's where I'm like, okay, there's something about this. It's not conflicting with other paid work. I will do this, but I only allow myself to do that once a year. And then I also ask, like, some of the questions I ask are like, what's the overall budget of the shoot in general? So that, what's the overall budget and what's the budget of the art department? And there are certain like graphs and things I've looked up before, and I've talked to other producers who are friends about like, hey, what percentage of the budget should be going to, what's typical for like the percentage of the budget. And that's going to change based on the region you're in, maybe. The other thing that helped is when I joined the union, there are certain union rates and you can look them up for your area. Rates change everywhere. But then I started, when people would ask me what it was and I had no idea what their budget was or where they were coming from, I would just say, well, I start with the standard union rate and I'm willing to work with you. Like, tell me about your project. I'm willing to work with you. And that gave me another, that just felt it. I think I had trouble naming numbers before then. And then once I was like, look, a whole industry has said that this is a normal rate, then it felt really good to just be able to say that. So look those up for the area that you're in. That's a lot of answers. Money is so tricky and weird.
I wanted to add that the one other thing that I started doing, even now, like it's just, and a lot of us do it, is just, maybe it's not just about the rate. You can find other ways to negotiate, like a higher kit, or, you know, hire, like I've always negotiate a minivan into my, like a minivan rental into my contract. I negotiate, like if for someone was mentioning the hotel being the same as the DPs. I was on a show once where they put me in the worst hotel, and then the DP and the director were in this fancy hotel. And after that, I was like, oh, no, 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 no. This is always going to be in my contract, is it must be comparable to the DP. And that's now, like, I negotiate that too. Like it's all part of it. So sometimes you can negotiate things, not just your rate, but like you can, like, yeah, maybe you can't meet the exact rate that I want, but if you give me that minivan and the nice hotel, okay, sure, let's do it. You know, like maybe as long as it's only tiny bit under, you know, not too crazy. But you know, there's different maneuvers, especially because sometimes, you know, the producer will be weirdly more understanding about your kit than they are about your rate. So you can pad your kit, you know, if you have to. You know, it is what it is.
I will just share a little tidbit, which is, well, this may not be worldwide. In fact, it probably isn't worldwide, but at least in the States, if you're coming onto, if you're coming onto at least a TV series, and it is, well, even if it's not union, and this would be a good practice to take hold of anyway. But if you're coming onto a series or something where you know there's been another production designer before you, I would always call that production designer, make friends with them, ask them what their rate was. Here in the States, for a union job, you have to make what that other production designer was making or more. You know, you can always ask for more. And if they offer you anything less, that's actually kind of illegal here on those kind of jobs. So, you know, just putting it out there, if you're coming onto a series, just make sure you sort of ask around. And it's a good practice to have anyway, because then you get a feel for what other people are making. I think part of what we're trying to do in the IAPDC here is create a form of people, you know, talking about rates openly, talking about what our working conditions are openly, so that we can, you know, like that lifting tide rises all boats. We want everybody to have really good, healthy living, working conditions. And, you know, I think the more that we do share what we're making, and, you know, if I could just share real quickly, you know, we had a situation where it's like, oh, you know, how do you get visual effects into your deal memo, or how do you get, you know, and this is why I pointed to Blair, but Blair was like, well, I've got certain things in my deal memo, like, you know, your title credit. I know that sometimes in different parts of the world, people don't get title credit the way that it's actually given to you here in the US. So, you know, we've learned from collaborating with each other that you can actually put that into a deal memo, or make sure that you ask for that, or even things that we don't know what to ask for. We're learning what people get so that we can create sort of an even working conditions for everybody worldwide, hopefully, and that's all what we deserve and what we're worth. Yeah, so that's a big part of what this collaborative and what our group is about, is creating those, you know, those relationships amongst ourselves, I guess, you know, so that we can share and learn and raise up all of us up at the same time. Are there any?
And this is a good opportunity.
We are being watched.
It's a good opportunity to talk about one of the other panels that we've organised, which is Creative Collaborators, which is from previs to visual effects. So we have directors, designers, and a panel of 4 shows with directors, designers, and visual effects producers talking together about that collaborative process. So we think it's very important to highlight the relationships that we have with other people in this ongoing collaborative process. And, you know, visual effects is newer in the world, newer but not so newer, but I'm going to put that in the chat. You can register to do that. That's next weekend, and that looks very exciting.
I was just going to add something to what Miranda was saying. Your deal memo is something you can author as well. It's like, it comes from production and you wait for your deal memo, And if you don't like the terms, you can cross things out. You can, you know, that it's, you are the co-authors of that contract. It's not, yeah, I think that's a thing that we've all kind of, I think, within the collective had our eyes open to that idea, really. And I think that sense of, you know, stipulating post-production days, even if there's no budget, but sort of saying, my deal is that I will have approval on VFX shots every second week or something like this.
Yeah.
Just to make it clear to people what you're interested in and what you want to, you know, how much you want to be the author of the work in that sense. So.
Quite often when production says, I've got your deal memo, I say, well, actually, let me send you mine. You know, I'm going to send you mine. That's the first thing out of my mouth. Like, I've got my own. And then if you don't want to agree with mine, we'll talk about it. Yeah, but, you know, learning what to put in there. And I'm creating a class called, you know, The Power of the Deal Memo and How to Negotiate. So look for that. That's a little shameless plug. Look for that in the future. Yeah, and you know, but thanks to everybody in our group, because it has been it's a, you know, an info sharing, collecting class. And then we also do want to highlight our Latin speaking panel too. Fiona, do you mind if I talk about that for a minute? So
yep, right. Yep, and I'll put the link in the chat.
And we'll put that
too.
link in the chat too. So we also have an amazing Latin panel happening, also called The World Builder's Voice, a chat with Latin production designers. And that is moderated by our own Daniela. I'm trying to look for her last name. I'm sorry, I can't find it.
Medeiros.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you. And Laura, and I've forgotten her last name too, but I'd written it in here and now I can't find it again. Fiona, do you know Laura's last name? I want to give here we go. Carvala. Laura Carvala and Daniela Medeiros. And you know, Daniela is part of our group as well. Look for us also on Production Designers 360. We're very much, you know, the platform that the Production Design Collective have put out, the new one. We're going to be, I think, shifting our meetings over to that platform. So if you want to join us, please look on PD 360, find us. We are the advocacy group. And we, just to sort of paraphrase and sort of to close it all out here, some of the things that we're working on sort of in our long-term plans and goals for the future are sharing experiences like we have already, possibly standardizing some things, like maybe even as difficult as it is, we all have our own, you know, definitions for production designer, but maybe like getting a very loose definition of production design and production designer, so that when we have panels like this, or if we're talking to producers or we're talking to the public, or even amongst learning production designers, there's an idea of what we do and the scope of what we cover, just to make sure that we're getting recognition. We're also, with a thanks to our lovely Rose, trying to get a definition into Wikipedia, because there is no definition in Wikipedia of production designer. So we're having some scholars write some educational papers that talk about production designers, so that we can get it sort of like notarized and into the Wikipedia page. We're also trying to create awards, and in fact, we have created a new production designer award at the Guadalajara International Film Festival. That was a big plus. So we're putting a toolkit together on how to create new awards, and maybe we can start talking to South by Southwest and talking to Cannes and say, please, can we have our own production design award? And more production design panels that actually just talk about the films that are winning, you know, that are up for the nominations. All production designers, that would be awesome. Again, deal memos, deal points, credit language, being involved in visual effects, and also talking about possible overtime when you're not in control of your time. If you're one of those production designers, you're working on more low budget things and you are on the set, that if your time on the set is needed, that you're not in control of that, you should be getting overtime. You know, so all of those things are things that you can think about putting into your deal memo. I sometimes have overtime in my deal memo. If I work over 12 hours, I get overtime. It's just like that. Yeah, so that's in a big, quick nutshell. That's kind of everything we're working on in the future. And please join us. We're open, and you know, we'd love as many members to come and be a part of our group as possible, so that we can create a better world for the world builders. To be as corny as hell, but there we go.
And then I'd like to take this.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go. You go,
All right.
Rachel.
Well, I was going to say thank you, but it sounded like that's what you were going to do. Go ahead.
I was going to take this opportunity to thank everybody who attended today in our amazing panel of Blair, Tracy, Jamie, Rose, Amelia, Anu, Miranda for being a co-facilitator. And it's so wonderful to see everybody here today. Also, shout out to the amazing PDC founders, and especially to Ivana, who has organised us very, very well. There are so many amazing programs on the International Production Design Week that are both virtual and in person around the world. So jump on the website and check something out if you want. And I'm also going to say that there will be another, I really hope that there will be another gathering, and that's an absolutely amazing opportunity. It's an in-person production design conference. The last alternate 2 years has been in Spetses in Greece, and it's just been absolutely amazing to connect with other production designers and talk all things production design, to dream, to elevate, to feel nourished by other people who do what you do and love what we love so much. And thank you so much, everybody. Anybody is welcome to join our group as well. So come on at any time, any of our meetings. So drop us a line if you'd like to come along. Thanks, Miranda.